A quick note for our listeners. This Radio Parkies presentation is sponsored by YOPN Network and includes people who have been living with Parkinson's for quite some time. The vocal challenges that you hear are due to the progression of this disease as well as deep brain stimulation surgeries. And we come as we are here. Everyone has a purpose and a contribution, and everyone is welcome. Thank you for listening.
You are unique, active, determined, resilient. You are not your diagnosis, and you are not alone. This is Young Onset Parkinson's Network. We believe young onset Parkinson's disease does not define you. You define it. We are a safe place to learn, connect, and engage within a supportive community that actually gets it. Because we've got it too. Welcome to Young Onset Parkinson's Network. Living well starts here.
Tonight on Radio Parkies, Mike Asian, Heather Kennedy, and I have a great chat with Vivek and Chai Puri. Vivek, diagnosed with Parkinson's 10 years ago, tells his story. Chai talks about why she started Married to PD and offers some great advice for all care partners. We'll be right back after Ed Sheeran and Bad Habits.
1, 2, 3. Every time you come around, you know I can't say no. Every time the sun goes down, I let you take control. I can feel the paradise before my world implodes. And tonight had something wonderful. My bad habits lead to late nights, sitting alone. Conversations with a stranger I barely know. Swearing this will be the last, but it probably won't. I got nothing left to lose or use or do. My bad habits lead to white eyes stare into space, and I know I lose control of the things that I say. Yeah, I was looking for a way out, now I can't escape. Nothing happens after 2. It's true, it's true. My bad habits lead to you. My bad habits lead to you. My bad habits lead to you. Every pure intention ends when the good times start. Falling over everything to reach the first time spark. It started under neon lights and then it all got dark. I only know how to go too far. My bad habits lead to late nights, sitting alone. Conversations with a stranger I barely know. Swearing this will be the last, but it probably won't. I got nothing left to lose or use or do. My bad habits lead to white eyes stare into space, and I know I lose control of the things that I say. Yeah, I was looking for a way out, now I can't escape. Nothing happens after 2. It's true, it's true. My bad habits lead to you. My bad habits lead to you. We took the long way round and burned till the fun ran out. Now my bad habits lead to late nights, sitting alone. Conversations with a stranger I barely know. Swearing this will be the last, but it probably won't. I got nothing left to lose or use or do. My bad habits lead to white
So I'm Indian American, North Indian American. Grew up in the DC area, upper 40s now. I was diagnosed in my late 30s, the day after our third kid was born, literally the day after. And so I'm closing in on 10 years with the diagnosis. Took about a year and a half of going through all kinds of whatever, trying to get to that point of learning what it was. Really just trying to figure out how to live with it and adapt to it as things progress, and that in every sense of the word, whether that's for myself and my physical health, if it's between the two of us, it's with the family, it's with friends, it's with work, it's the typical portfolio of problems and issues and everything else. And it's been interesting to say the least. I had DBS about 3.5 years ago. I had back surgery about 10 days ago. I'm getting my punch card filled. I think I get a free coffee after 2 more surgeries.
How's it going with the recovery?
Apparently better than most. I feel bad for those that do worse than most, because better than most is not great, but it's not bad. I mean, I'm not complaining. It's gotten a lot better over the last like 2-3 days, and you become a lot more aware of care partner burdens when you burden your care partner that much more.
How old were your children when you diagnosed? How old were the kids?
They were just about 2 and just about 4.
So my name is Chai. We've been married for almost 15 years now. 13 of that has been me being a full-time mom to our 13-year-old, now 11-year-old, and now 9-year-old. So that's pretty much what I have been doing. And I also grew up here in the United States. So this is home for me. And I have not had any surgeries.
Nice.
Good.
Well,
Madonna
actually,
is so envious. You're looking good.
One important detail. She grew up in the Boston area.
Smartest people on the planet. But what you're saying is you know how to fight.
I know how to fight, and I can drive really, really well.
Nice.
I've never met a parallel parking spot that I couldn't parallel park in.
That is true.
Nice. So Vivek and Chai, I have been listening to Married to PD, and I cannot believe how wonderful it is. I sent it to everyone I know, including my partner. And it is giving voice to something that there was a big gaping space for in our community. We often talk about how Parkinson's affects us, the person who has been diagnosed. We don't speak quite enough about how it's like a sword that swings around and hits everybody. I often call myself the werewolf because I just don't know from day to day, hour to hour, how I'll even find myself. My daughter comes in one time and I'm freaking out. The next time I'm totally calm. It's medication, it's sleep, it's so many factors. With this disability, which is what I'm going to call it for the sake of our conversation, changing in the relationship, how do you learn how to communicate so well? It seems like you guys are in a space where you can communicate, and that is so important, and many of us don't know how to do that. Any pearls for us?
Well, I think the podcast obviously is a little bit more curated. So, I would always ask anybody not to take that away from the podcast and how we communicate. And in fact, he's only on a couple of episodes. So he's not really somebody that I talk with regularly on the podcast. As far as communication, I think we're pretty normal. I mean, we have our ups, we have our downs. We're constantly learning. We take 2 steps back, 1 step forward a lot of times. It's not that abnormal. If anyone out there can say they're an expert in communication, I'd accuse them of lying, because there's absolutely no way you can go through a marriage completely flawlessly. And yes, communication is key, but again, I'm not a communications expert. Vivek's not a communications expert. We try to be as open as possible, but we are also our own people. So we do communicate differently, and we always have. We probably always will. But it's really just about learning how to say what we want to say, get across what we want to get across, and having the other person trust that what you're saying does have some validity to it.
You are listening to the YOPN podcast. We're both wrapped up in our own heads. What's going on? How did you get through that?
That was, my opinion at least, that was a tough time. Not in the very beginning. I think in the very beginning, you can kind of pretend it doesn't exist and just kind of chug on through life. But then what's happening is, from the PWP's point of view, we're progressing and we're feeling the progression. It can be minor little adjustments. Not sure how much of that is visible, how much of that is not visible, how much of that is in our heads. And, as I joked on the podcast, it's all in our heads. There's enough to think about for yourself. It's kind of what you said, Heather, before. We're all wrapped up in ourselves. And one thing that took me a really long time to even begin to understand is that it's not the impact on her through me. It's the impact on her as her. Everybody has their own issues. Guess what? She's progressing in age and whatever else. Our kids are my parents are, her parents are. I mean, our friend, everybody has, life goes on and other people have their own stuff happening. It's not like everything else is suddenly frozen in time and we're the only ones progressing. And I think if I look back, that was kind of one of the things I kind of lost sight of.
And as this degenerative progressive condition marches on, we need to live and move with our disability in a world that is not going to accommodate, in relationships that may not accommodate either. Like, for example, work relationships, and you work for a business that I understand was the family business and or your own, which makes it even harder because you're always at work in some way. And with Parkinson's, we always have this third party in the relationship. It's like it's me and you, and then there's always Parkinson's there. And to accept that is so difficult and so much love. I wanted to know, what is the thing that you lean on when things are really rough? Like when you just can't come to a place where you agree upon something and Parkinson's is really railing on you. You have 3 kids, you find out your husband has Parkinson's while you just gave birth to your 3rd child. I mean, you really had a trial by fire here, Chai. So yeah. I guess I would ask, what do you guys lean on when it gets real tough?
Well, I think it would probably just segue from what Vivek was saying. It's really, it's not always about us. Those first few years were a complete blur because we had the little kids. And if we didn't have the little kids and it was just him and I dealing with Parkinson's, I don't know that it would be very productive. But we did have these other distractions around, and he had work, and we have hobbies and friends and social lives and other family members. So it's really, we don't live in a bubble. And so to deal with when things are really tough is we got to go outside our bubble and look beyond what we are dealing with. And I say this over and over again, this is not the worst thing ever. There are many other people in this world who are living in much more dire situations. And that's not lost on me. That's not lost on us. So in those times where I feel like, and I probably have been there before, especially when things were rougher with the younger kids and when the disease was still new to us, we'd sort of get lost in our own little spiral. But then you just open your eyes and there's something that's terrible that's happening out in the world. We have medications. We have access to these fantastic physicians. We have a support network. We have access to podcasts. We have access to all sorts of resources. We have the internet. There's literally people out there living with Parkinson's who have none of that. So who are we to say that, we have it terrible? Because in the scheme of things, we don't. It's not a great situation, but it's not the worst.
Thank you for reminding us about that, because sometimes we forget that.
Yeah, I think there's another way to look at a similar situation, which is, you're right, we could have it a lot worse. The other one is that the relationships you cultivate in the normal times, and they could be friends, it could be, this is the one thing I would say that before married to PD especially was the case, those with Parkinson's, we have the Facebook groups, you have people you meet online, you have people you meet locally, you have whether it's boxing or in our case climbing and whatever, these groups of people that you can talk to and get some perspective from within the context of the disease, let alone people who have other far worse conditions. And how do they kind of cope? And what do they regret, or what do they wish they did differently? Or what do they do that worked for them? Doesn't mean it's going to work for you, but don't let those experiences and trials and tribulations go to waste, because they can do you some good. Again, give you some much needed perspective and ideas about how to handle it yourselves. But that leaves out a whole group of people, which is the care partners. It's something I didn't appreciate even remotely enough at the time. It's so easy to think, oh, I'm going through this.
Right.
I'm feeling it every day. And if you have somebody who loves you, they feel it every day too. And you don't always, at least I don't always realize. It took me a long time to realize that.
Right.
That I was seen. Doesn't mean it has to be acknowledged. It's very painful to acknowledge, I assume.
I think as a care partner, you have to be open to change. You have to be flexible. You have to be open to realizing there's a new normal in your life and being okay with that. And I think I'm finally at the point where I'm okay with that now. I understand what my role is. And it's okay to have dreams that aren't fulfilled and get replaced with other dreams. I think that a lot of times we look back on regret, like, oh, I wish I could, continue my career this way and we could go on this vacation and whatnot. But at the end of the day, even if we didn't have Parkinson's, we may not have reached those dreams.
Right.
And so what my new normal is may be different than what I had expected, but that doesn't mean I'm not okay with it. And I think obviously everybody is different. I do think that one of my strengths is that I can compartmentalize things. So I know when, if things are bad with Parkinson's, I need to focus on the Parkinsons and Vivek. When he's okay, I don't focus on him. I got to go do other things and focus on the kids or focus on myself. That it's not all bad. It's not always bad. And I think you need to, as a care partner, recognize when it's bad enough that you need to step in, and not bad enough that you can separate yourself, do other things. It is a chronic illness. If we completely lose ourselves as care partners in it, then I think that's when you kind of set yourself up for some miserable times.
On an episode, you talked about when you were first diagnosed, how you handled it, Jay, was different than how Vivek handled it.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, for me, it was relying again on us communicating about, like, I didn't understand it. I didn't want to kind of comprehend it alone. I was trying to understand it together. She's a doctor by training, and that plus the fact that she's my wife meant that it's one of those things that, and maybe it's also being an extrovert, I'm not sure. But to process it meant to discuss it. And I think there was the ability to ignore it too at the same time. So
we both ignored it for 8 years.
I didn't have the luxury of 8 years. I want to say luxury, that's the wrong word to use. I think we probably had a good 2 years, maybe. I
wouldn't say we ignored it. We just didn't make it public for a couple of years. Certainly, we definitely handled it ourselves. I mean, he didn't shy away from medical treatment or medical attention or some of the important things that help you manage the disease. I think that how we presented it to others was where we differed.
No, how was that different?
I went public on Facebook, especially for a variety of reasons. And to me, that was the best thing ever from the disclosure point of view. It was, it opened it up a lot of resources that I did not know were there, whether it's individuals or some Facebook groups or whatever. And it just brought in all these warm wishes from lots of people. Whether those wishes yield anything, not that I was looking for anything concrete, but it was just nice to hear from all these different people who I hadn't heard from in Lord knows how long. And me, I've never heard it from since. But even though they're just registered a little bit, felt good to me. But again, this is the person who's the focus of the attention. So it's a little bit different that way.
But you weren't alone either.
Exactly. Yeah, it can't come out of the shadows.
Many of us feel an ambivalence about social media for obvious reasons, which we won't even get into here. But what I love about the social media platform is finding things like new friends, where I met you, and finding these podcasts that help me navigate my own challenges in relationships. So thank you so much for putting this podcast out there. It is brilliantly done. For anyone who is listening, please find Married to PD, as in the number 2 and just PD. And Chai interviews a number of people, including, but not limited to, because it's going on and I'm so excited about this, Jimmy Choi, Cheryl Choi, who's married to Jimmy, and some other people that you might want to check out. It reminds me of an NPR podcast. It really is brilliantly done. And I don't say this about many people because I listen to a lot of podcasts. Some of them are very, just kind of thrown together, and I'm listening for the content, but your content matters even outside of PD for anyone living with, chronic illness. So I just want to keep promoting this. Where do you promote the podcast?
I don't really. I mean, I'm Tara. So I wanted to just go back to what you were asking us, Mike, about how we dealt with going public with the news. Really, really differ. And that's where we realize how different our personalities really were. Vivek is a classic extrovert, classic textbook extrovert. I am an extreme introvert. And that really, really came out when the news went public. I don't get my energy from other people. And I certainly never want to be the center of attention. So when Vivek says like he was getting all the attention, I'm glad he was getting all the attention. I don't want any of the attention, but I did want to maintain our own sense of normalcy in our family. So when he went public with the news, that sense of normalcy where I was trying to raise 3 children in our little, Northern Virginia town, was kind of crumbled. And all of a sudden I became the wife of the guy with Parkinson's disease. And I was afraid that our kids would be the kids of the guy with Parkinson's disease. Oh, their dad has Parkinson's disease. And to be honest, not many people know what that is, especially when in the younger set, we all know that. So, are they going to look at him like he's disabled, like he is going to fall over at any minute? Are they going to doubt his abilities as a father? I had all these different fears running around in my head. So for me, it became a huge source of anxiety when everybody else knew about the news. It wasn't a comfort to me like it was to Vivek. So that took a lot for me to wrap my head around. And people, and I think that as a care partner, you don't really want to be the care partner. Like you don't sign up for this, right? You're not thinking, oh yeah, this is, I'm going to take this and run with it. That's not really what I was feeling at the moment. So to be the second party involved with Parkinson's disease did become a burden for me. And because I was always, because I think I had a medical background, I felt like I was sort of the spokesperson for the family. And people used to say to me all the time, oh, well, you're a doctor, so this must be easy for you. And I remember thinking, because I read it in a textbook, like a paragraph in a textbook one year when I was sitting in the lecture hall, makes it easy to understand the mechanics of it. But anybody can understand the mechanics of it if they just read a few pages on the internet. But becoming emotionally involved with somebody living with Parkinson's disease is a completely different thing. So I didn't know how to respond to a lot of these comments, and I still don't know how to respond. So that was part of the reason I did want to do this podcast. And I did seek out a care partner community, is to figure out how to respond and how others were responding, and not respond at all if I don't want to, and just be able to vent with my own peers who are also dealing with the same issues.
There's one finger that can help you respond.
What? There is an emoji for that too. It's, well, let me just chime in on one thing. Some of the benefits that I got from social media and any other kind of outreach is what honestly made me happy, that when Married to PD started, what was that old saying? Like, I always thought somebody should do something about that. And then I realized that I'm somebody. The point being that she started it because there's a need, but there was nobody filling that need. And there's actually I mean, there's so many different ways to slice the pie in a sense of permutations, but like the specificity of it is wives of people who have young onset Parkinson's specifically. At least from my opinion, would give it a lot of power. There's a whole subcategory of men who have spouses who have young onset that is not being met by anybody. And I hope to God somebody out there starts that.
People have asked me to start that, and I think to myself, but I'm not them. And so I'm not at that point where I can put myself in a male spouse's shoes and do that in a constructive, in a fair way. And so I'm not, and I don't want to be half-hearted about it. So until that point comes, I'm happy if somebody else wants to do that. But for now, the group that I had started is really geared towards the female partners of people with Parkinson's, because I do believe that males and females do have different responsibilities on their shoulders. And so I can speak from a female point of view and understand and relate to other females in my situation. So I don't necessarily promote the podcast, but I do have a target audience, and that is those female partners, whether it's spouses or people in long-term relationships. It doesn't matter. Anybody, any status is welcome. And we have people from around the world that do come onto our Facebook group, which is the most positive way that social media has worked for me. So that has been really nice to bring the whole world, global community together. As far as the podcast goes, it's still new. I'm still working on it. I'm still ironing out the details. I appreciate the positive feedback, and I hope it continues. I do have to say the internet makes it very easy to put together a podcast these days. So I'm thankful for all those tools that I have, which probably weren't there 10 years ago when we were diagnosed. So, I think it's going to be easier for people with Parkinson's and their care partners to connect as the future moves on. And I hope that people take advantage of that. So,
and I'll not to keep on adding on, but I'm going to, is there's a temptation, and I don't know if it's specific to me, to try to help, where I think, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that, to improve it? And this is as recently as yesterday. And I have to remember to keep my freaking mouth shut, because I mean, to be honest, like, we dominate so much of the conversation. I mean, even in this group, right? I mean, all of us have Parkinson's except for Che, right? And so there's, to give the independence, and let me step back and let it just, whatever happens, because they know what is best for them. I'm so loving the fact that the podcast and the group exists, that I want to help, but sometimes I have to just learn that the best way to help is not to help, and just to shut up and let it exist and let it move, do what it needs to do. It's just an interesting, very, very topical conversation that we had just yesterday about this.
When and how did you realize you were both stuck in your own heads? And how'd you pull out of it?
That's a good question. For me, agonists were, and again, this is not going to come as a huge surprise to a lot of people, agonists were awful. And I did not understand what they were doing to me. And to be crass about it, well, maybe she's mourning, I'm horning. That's my new phrase. It's a stupid phrase. I'll think of a better one, I promise. But yeah, like, I'm going through some totally different mindset in it. in the progression in work and keeping it a secret and what the medication is doing to me. And as it ratchets up, all while there's a whole set of emotions going on over here. There's a whole family to raise. There's everything else to do. I mean, there's a period of time where it was particularly rough. I can't say there was necessarily a given moment that I can think of. I know that at some point I told my doctor I don't want to be on this anymore. I feel like the doctors were are under-prepped to ask the right questions in the right way. I'm sure that's a whole separate conversation. But from a care partner point of view, that's kind of where it was for me.
Yeah, I think that, like I said in the beginning, I was so involved just, keeping 3 small people in our house alive that I didn't have a whole lot of space in my head to invest in how we're going to deal with Parkinson's. All I knew is that he's had to see his doctor and he had to be on his medications and we were going to get through it. But I needed to breastfeed the baby because he can't, so I had my responsibilities that I needed to take care of. And so I really kind of threw myself into that. And I think it was when the kids started growing up and they were all off at school is when I kind of was like, oh, shoot, now I'm alone with my own thoughts. And they're not always the greatest thoughts. And so I need to not be alone with my thoughts. And that's, I think, when I really kind of thought about how am I going to get other care partners in my corner? How am I going to sort of put a group together? So once I started hearing more stories and realizing, quite frankly, how normal people are out there who are living with Parkinson's, that got me out of my head. And I thought, hey, we can do this, and we can do this in a positive way. Yeah, it stinks. No chronic neurological degenerative disease is a fun thing to live with, I'm sure, as a care partner or as a person who is living with it. I say this like over and over again. I never want to be him. I don't know what he goes through. He tells me and I listen, but I don't know firsthand. I can only imagine. He doesn't know what I go through. And, I can tell him my thoughts, but he doesn't always know. So getting out of my own head was very helpful for me. And I had to do that through getting connected with other care partners.
You are listening to the YOPN podcast. Living well starts here.
And I don't know how care partners even, if they know this, if they share this, if they discuss this, but even when I look on the message boards, I think people allude to things. And, if you've gone through it, you can read the code words about like what people, when they say certain things, what they're probably thinking in their heads or whatever else. But then I get like direct messages from people over the years that are way more direct, way more honest. And there's some crazy stuff. And again, it just reminds me of just how corrosive sometimes. I'd be curious to know what care partner. I have some friends going through this right now with agonists. And it just seems like the same damn loop over and over and over again. Every time somebody gets on, you're gonna take that exit. 50% of people are gonna take that exit, and there's a car wreck up ahead, waiting for you, and people have the blind spot is just enormous.
Or we see the car wreck and we still go toward it because it's an impulse that's chemical.
Sure, yeah.
I think I've seen dopamine agonists now wreak havoc on people's relationships or even their own individual behaviors. People have gone into debt. People have obviously not been able to keep their relationship intact. It affects their relationship with their children. It affects them medically. If they're eating compulsively, that extra weight they're putting on is going to affect them medically. So it just compounds their problems. I consider ourselves very lucky that we were able to he was able to get off the agonist in a structured way, and that we did survive that. Because I don't think that that's actually the norm, unfortunately. And as a care partner at the time, my experience was so different than so many other people's experience. So I don't know that I have necessarily like any kind of advice for care partners, except to just stay strong to yourself and stay to, I'm not into cliches, but stay true to yourself. You don't have, most care partners don't have care partners. And so I can see what's happening to him. He doesn't see what's happening to me. So I had to stay strong. Again, I'm very, very lucky. And I think we are lucky that as far as I know, it didn't go into any more extreme things that might have affected our relationship. But I'm fully aware that it could have. So I do consider ourselves lucky. Now, we also had a very, very good, and still do have a very good movement disorder specialist who did ask him the right questions during his visits. Is he engaging in anything that's risky behavior, high risk behavior, addictive behavior, et cetera, et cetera? I understand now that that's not the norm. So if there's anything that people with Parkinson's can take away is if they're put on an agonist and they know this ahead of time, they can go to their doctor prepared and say, this is what I've been doing these last 3 months. Or, their doctor needs to ask them if they are experiencing specific side effects, not general. Are you experiencing side effects? What does that even mean? Am I tired? Am I nauseous? Am I headache? Those are all the common side effects. These are very specific side effects. And you're right, Heather, they are chemically related. And that is the physician's responsibility if they are the prescribing provider. So that's my word of advice. People with Parkinson's can advocate for themselves when they're on agonists to make sure they tell their doctor what's happening. And care partners can engage in self-preservation by understanding what they're capable of and what their limits are.
If I can chime in with one thing, because all this conversation honestly has brought back some memories. And I think, Mike, you asked kind of what was the point at which I switched or made a change, or what I don't know if it was Heather or Mike who asked that. It was 3 things that happened at least in very close succession. One of them was I was at work standing next to my father, who I work with, and he was sitting down. He looked over and he said, "You need to lose some weight." He never says that. So that was just kind of a funny one. I gained 15 pounds. And when I switched, I actually lost 30 pounds in less than a year without even trying. Just exercise and not eating compulsively. That was one. Another one was, and I was driving with the kids in the car and I started dozing off. I didn't truly fall asleep, but I started dozing off. And more than maybe normal, like not just like bleary-eyed, but actually like, eyes shut for a split second. And again, this is where the network comes in. I'd heard from friends. Another one was a particularly bad argument that we got into on a trip somewhere. And I was just feeling very low and feeling a bit too low. And I realized that I don't want this to end that way.
You are listening to the YOPN podcast.
May I also say, for the record, Vivek in particular, you're one of the most joyful, funny, witty, clever, interesting guys I've met. Same thing with these mics. When I met you, so dynamic, so out there. So even with all the things we're dealing with, we can find some laughter, some levity, some silliness, and make fun of ourselves. There's a way to lighten this up. And you always manage to do that for me. So I just want to say thank you, because in spite of these great challenges you have, and I'm thrilled, you two are my new heroes. Because working on a relationship is really hard. Don't I know it? I'm divorced. So this is true love. And I'm so honored to be here with all of you.
You are listening to the YOPN podcast. Living well starts here.
So, went from dad jokes to my kids actually having great jokes at my expense. This is actually the flip side of what you were saying, Heather. Like one of the survival mechanisms that, Mike and I and Heather, we all make fun of ourselves. And the great thing is it invites others to do the same, which in my opinion, destigmatizes to a degree somewhat of the disease, even if it's just tangentially related. I hate it when people tiptoe around. I don't want pity.
Yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, the last 2 years of the pandemic, we've been home with the kids. And I mean, they've lived with Parkinson's their whole lives. They know nothing different. But he's still their dad. He's not immune to a teenage girl's attitudes and emotions.
And he's 9, 11, and 13.
Yeah, he's not immune to the eye rolls and the
ages
and the abuse that fathers get.
I had guacamole thrown in my direction yesterday.
What?
She didn't want guacamole on our tacos. She got guacamole on our tacos, and
teenagers are savages.
Hey, if that's the worst thing in our life, I think we've done okay, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hey guys, anything you want to positive note to leave the audience with?
Even this podcast to a degree is curated. I'm glad that we leave the impression that we communicate so well, whatever. And I think we do overall, but everybody has their ups and downs. And I think the more public that people are with some of the lumps, I think the easier it is to understand that the lumps each person goes through, it's okay. All right. This stuff happens.
Like any relationship, it's a work in progress. There's nothing unique necessarily to us as a couple. Yes, there's Parkinson's involved, but everybody's got their stuff. Every couple has their stuff. And so, it's a work in progress and we work at it. Sometimes it's hard, and sometimes the work isn't that hard and it's enjoyable, like a job, a job that you love. You got to keep your eyes over to the horizon and, look at the big picture. And, we want to be a close family. We want our kids to feel safe at home. For them to feel safe at home, he and I need to be on the same team. So that's just the way it is.
but don't fly blind. No, what I was saying was just don't fly blind. Try to find somebody who can help guide you, understand that the people around your spouse is going through something who can help you understand what it's like from a care partner's point of view, from the person with Parkinson's point of view. Just try to get as much information, try to get some perspective from somebody maybe who's gone through it, especially somewhat recently or not recently, but that that this is not some BS excuse that's independent to you. You're not doing anything wrong. It's not your fault as a care partner, as a person with Parkinson's, as a kid, as a parent, whatever the situation may be, that there is some perspective out there. So you don't kick yourself over and over again saying, what am I doing wrong? What's wrong with us? Well, we know what's wrong, right? I mean, those on this call have a much better perspective now than we ever did back then.
That's a wrap for tonight, folks. A big thank you to Vivek and Chai for their honesty in telling their story. Thanks for listening, everybody. Have a great night. We're going to close it out with a little bit of Ariana Grande and her song No Tears Left to Cry. Have a great night.
So I'm picking it up, I'm picking it up, I'm picking it up, I'm loving, I'm living, I'm picking it up, I'm picking it up, loving, I'm living, so we turn it up, yeah, we turning it up. Ain't got no tears in my body, I ran out, but boy, I like it, I like it, I like it. Don't matter how, what, when, who tries it, we out here vibing, we vibing, we vibing. Even when it's raining down, can't stop, so shut your mouth. And if you don't know, then I know it, babe, yeah. Right now I'm in a state of mind, I wanna be in like all the time. Ain't got no tears left to cry. the colors in you. I see them too, and boy, I like them. I like them. I like them. We way too fly to partake in all this hate. We out here vibing. We vibing. We vibing. Even when it's raining down, can't stop now. Can't stop, so shut your mouth. Shut your mouth. And if you don't know, then now you know it, babe. No, babe, yeah. Right now, I'm in a state of mind. I wanna be in like all the time. Ain't got no tears left to cry. So I'm picking it up, picking it up. I'm loving, I'm living, I'm picking it up. I just want you to come with me. We have another mentality. Ain't got no tears left to cry. So I'm picking it up, picking it up. I'm loving, I'm living, I'm picking it up. Even when it's raining down, can't stop now. Shut your mouth. Ain't got no tears left to cry. I just want you to come with me. We have another mentality. Ain't got no tears left to cry. I'm picking it up, picking it up. I'm living, I'm picking it up. Picking it up, picking it up. Loving, I'm living, so we turn it up. Yeah, we turning it up.